The current state of affairs in the late-night talk shows can seem like a jumbled mess. With the combination of political talk shows intertwined with the traditional late-night talk shows, it seems like every channel, including streaming, has their own variety of talk show. These shows are also distant relatives from the shows Carson and Steve Allen gave us. After the Leno-O'Brien incident, and once Leno retired for good, 2 years after he said he was going to leave the first time, Jimmy Fallon took over as host of The Tonight Show. Fallon, like O'Brien, got his start on Saturday Night Live, where he wrote and performed comedy sketches, and then later being an anchor on the popular reoccurring segment on SNL, Weekend Update. Much like in the same way the older late-night talk show hosts were pushed out and replaced by younger hosts, Fallon's rise to The Tonight Show was no different. He gained fame on SNL, a show primarily watched by 18 to 35-year-olds, so it only made sense that NBC wanted to capture that demographic and that Fallon, who was hosting the late-night show that immediately followed Leno's Tonight Show, would be next in line. But Fallon's beginning on The Tonight Show were met with low ratings and subpar interviews. It was when NBC realized that Fallon was a performer and not a stand-up comic or an interviewer that his show began to gain its own kind of fame. Fallon went back to the roots that Steve Allen set in place and turned The Tonight Show into a variety show, focusing on skits, musical acts, and occasionally comedians. But Fallon and his Tonight Show were not and are still not known for their interviews. This is especially true of the more recent interview he had with then presidential candidate Donald Trump and asked soft and non-controversial questions. But Fallon treats The Tonight Show as his own version of Saturday Night Live, where skits and music are the main appeal, as well as how his online presence is viewed. Much like David Letterman would stage people who didn't get along to be on the show at the same time in order to generate buzz about the show, Fallon does the same thing but uses viral videos. He sets up scenarios for his guests that he knows will get huge hits on YouTube, and then puts these small segments online rather than the whole show or the whole celebrity interview. Fallon presents his celebrity guests, and even the non-entertainment ones, in a way that fans may not have seen before.
Scientific sound, search thought, silencing, superfly, saps out of soft, tails 10 time talented, too tough. Take that, challengers, get a tune up. Universal, unique, untouched, unadulterated, the raw, uncut. Birth by sports, victorious, valid, violate vines that a vein make him vanish. Well, my word, what it was mixed, just weeded up, words weaving up, I'm a worship. Xerox, Max, radiation, old, extra large, X, height, letters, 6 xylophone tones, yellowback, yak mouth, young ones, yours. Yesterday's zones, all cells, all yawns, zigzag zombies, zooming to the zenith, zero and zen, thoughts of a zealous from Zealons.
But what purpose does this serve? The Tonight Show and its host has had a lot of power over society, as we saw from people like Carson, Letterman, and Leno. But this new generation of hosts on The Tonight Show doesn't appear to be using his show for anything other than making videos that will go viral online. Fallon's show seldom features unknown comedians, and his guests are almost always the super famous entertainers. This is where Stephen Colbert, the Late Show host on CBS that took over for Letterman, comes into play. Colbert, like Fallon, got his start on SNL, but then he quickly moved to Comedy Central, where Jon Stewart was making a political satire show. Colbert quickly became a frequent presenter on The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, and was soon offered his own show to follow Stewart's. It was on this show, The Colbert Report, that Colbert took on an alter ego, where he would present the counter news to Stewart's. Paired with Stewart, The Daily Show and The Colbert Report were picking up 18 to 35-year-olds left and right and getting a very strong fan base. So when Letterman announced his retirement, CBS began the search and found Colbert, without his counterpart who had retired a few months earlier and who was looking for something different. So in January of 2015, Colbert took over for Letterman on The Late Show and added his own spin on the show that he had a lot of practice with: politics. Now, it may have been that Colbert was taking over for The Late Show during a time of the craziest presidential election in modern history, or it could have been that's what he was comfortable with. But one thing was and is for certain: Colbert has no problem speaking his mind about how he feels about politics and politicians in general in the United States.
Mr. Trump, your presidency, I love your presidency. I call it disgrace the nation. You're not the POTUS, you're the bloatus. You're the glutton with the button. You're a regular Gorge Washington. You're the presidents, but you're turning into a real prick-tater. Sir, you attract more skinheads than free Rogaine. You have more people marching against you than cancer. You talk like a sign language gorilla who got hit in the head. In fact, the only thing your mouth is good for is being Vladimir Putin's holster. Your presidential library. Your presidential library is going to be a kid's menu in a couple of Jugs magazine. The only thing smaller than your hands is your tax returns. And you can take that any way you want. We got a great show for you tonight.
Colbert's monologues constantly attack then candidate and now presidential Trump and his administration. But unlike Carson and Arsenio Hall, he seemed to not be able to influence the voters in such a drastic way. Instead, his influence comes in the form of inviting guests on his show who are policymakers, researchers, scientists, and other intellects. His monologues are funny, but they also are a time when Colbert tries to influence his audience to do something and make a change. Even his show on Comedy Central, although satirical, still provided information and pointed out the flaws in the political system. So, with some tweaking, that is what Colbert did in his CBS show. His monologues are political, often attacking the president who often attacks back, every comedian's dream. And he also has segments on his show that are very similar to those segments that he had on the Colbert Report. While Fallon and Colbert are still very new to their roles of the late-night talk show host, they have all tried to change with the times and keep their shows relevant with an audience and generation that is cutting cable and leaving the networks by the thousands. The networks are currently drowning by the high waves that is streaming TV and are looking for a flotation device and hoping that these late-night talk show hosts will be their saviors. Each of the hosts are young enough that they resonate with the millennial generation, and each of them are trying their best to post content online so that the networks can still generate some advertising money from the online ads that play before the videos they post on YouTube. While the days of getting 15 to 20 million viewers to tune into your show every night are over, the days of online videos getting 100+ million views are still strong. Network talk show hosts also have a huge sea of shows and other comedians to compete with, and many of these basic cable hosts are creating shows that are pulling away from the key demographic that the networks are trying to capture. While Steve Allen and Johnny Carson helped to create a genre of TV and form the blueprints on how the shows would go, hosts like Colbert and Fallon and many others are trying to come up with ways to keep the genre from dying, at least on the networks. But I think it's going to be a very hard fight. Even with the tens of millions that might watch a few clips from the shows every now and then, the networks have other things to deal with other than the late-night talk shows. They have to compete with some of the best fictional television ever coming from streaming services and premium cable. They are fighting with a world that has what appears to be unlimited money, global reach, and creative and uncensored freedom. Allen and Carson created something special, but it was created inside of a box. And now outside of that box is flourishing, and late-night talk shows are still stuck inside that box with what appears to be no chance of getting out.